Welcome to the new season of the Live Your Spa Life show. The Spa in Spa Life stands for Seek Power Always, that divine power within you to do what you're here to do. The theme for this season is Freedom Fighter. Amazing people like you share ways to ensure your freedom physically, financially, spiritually, and in your relationships to create a world-class life. In these times of uncertainty, it's time for you to move past the distractions and start trusting yourself more through your God-given knowingness. No one truly knows better what's best for you than you. In this season, you'll have plenty of examples of people choosing their best life and giving a voice of freedom to those who are also looking to have their best life. Thank you for sharing your precious time with us and being part of the Live Your Spa Life conversation. With us today is Geeta Sidhu Robb. She is an aid in impacting the lives of thousands, let's just say thousands of hardworking, uber busy professionals to live with less stress, perform better, and achieve insane success, all whilst keeping a strong balance and mentally and physically. Geeta, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, you and I have had some great conversations, and one of the ones that we've talked about is what's going on here in the world, it's particularly around fear. There's so much fear that's happening out there. How can you help people look at, moving past it? What are some of the tools that you use?
I think firstly, what we need to understand is that fear is something that you have to, I'm trying to think of the way to say this. You have to accept fear for fear to have an effect on you. And that sounds terrible because you're like, no. But if I'm here and I'm scared, you don't mean I'm accepting it. But there's a pathway made in your brain where you think this thing is terrifying. I'm going to be terrified. And therefore the fear is part of me. It's like I've always swum my whole life. I was a professional swimmer. And 3 years ago, I got stung really badly by jellyfish. And I got, my jellyfish sting literally got infected. And it absolutely has made me terrified to go into the water. But what that means is that I got to a place where I accepted that I was now going to get hurt in the sea. So I got afraid of it, right? So that's something that I think that we first need to understand and I try and get people to understand. But secondly, that when you're deeply afraid, you also put an enormous amount of stress on your system. And then it becomes that stress becomes the mind killer more than anything else. The fear is like the entry gateway emotion into allowing massive amounts of stress into your life.
Right. So, let's say, people are mired in this, right? You're in that fear response that's happening. How do you crawl out of that?
So the first thing that you do when you're in a fear response is you start with the physical, because actually it's a massive physical response. Your body's getting flooded with all kinds of hormones, and it's incredibly difficult for you to manage that process. A really, really, really simple exercise is to put both your feet flat on the ground, and then put one hand on your stomach, one hand on your heart, and look down. And you need to consciously look down because it activates the vagus nerve. And then you want to breathe in and watch your lower hand move in and out. So and you watch your lower hand moving in and moving out and moving in and moving out. And what it does, can you see how that completely reduces? It just brings it right down. It's insanely effective at grounding you back into your body, which gives you a sense of solidity and stability.
Yes, I love this. We forget that we have so many choices on how we can choose to respond to things. Yeah. And, when your go-to is fear or, uncertainty or overwhelm and all of those kind of things, it just allows you to shut down more and more. Whereas when you're talking about having this expansive thinking, right, there's actually practical things that you can do to get your power back, right? We've talked about, standing in your power and being able to do that on a deeper level. So I love that. I love this whole shifting the way that you can think. So I would love for you to paint the picture and kind of take us back of what life was like for you in the 90s and then, how that evolved back into, back to 2002, right? There, you had a specific evolution that happened for you. And I really want our listeners to, if you're driving, pull over, because, this is a really great parallel of what's happening in the world, where you feel like, everything's going great, and then something happens, right? And then what are the kind of things that you do to shift that way of being?
I feel quite worried about this point, because I was like, are we going to talk about my son? Because I can think of at least 12 things that happened in the 90s, which is terrible. In itself is so bad. I grew up in Malawi, which is in Africa. And I grew up in a dictatorship, which was a very, very fear-creating place to grow up in. So we constantly grew up at a level of fear of, you have to do this, or you have to do that, or you have to do the other. And it's a very interesting way to have grown up when we now are in that kind of world where, because of COVID and the pandemic, we're being told how we can and can't live, what we do and don't do, and how we're tagged as people based on our choices. And so I find this really very familiar because I grew up with it. And I followed that pathway, and I'm an Indian girl from a very upper class, wealthy Indian family, which meant that we were even more constrained. You did what you were told, you did it when you were told, and you did it how you were told. Nobody really cared how I felt about any of it. I mean, I remember one of my best friends going, "What do you want to eat?" And me kind of looking a bit blank, because honestly, our lives were controlled to the extent that you sort of just ate what was put down in front of you. What do you mean, what do I want to eat? I have a choice? It was just really stupid. And all of this carried on really quite comfortably until my son got ill. And he was allergic to an injection that he was given, and ended up developing extreme asthma, eczema, and anaphylaxis. So he had, a few months into this, cardiorespiratory arrest. His heart stopped beating. And he was tiny. I mean, I'm literally holding my hands out like the size of a small watermelon. And his heart stopped beating, and they had to resuscitate him. It was in a coma for a week, 10 days. And all these little tubes, around the groin, because they haven't got veins big enough to put them anywhere else in his body. And, it was so interesting because when I was sitting in that place going, oh my God, my life is just terrible. And I remember reaching out to my family and going, I really need some help. Can someone come out? And I'd been the person that had kind of always done more or less what I was told to do. And I remembered that when things like that didn't go well, I was left to deal with them alone. And I was told, just follow the system. And I'm like, but the system hurt my child. And they're like, just follow the system. And I was like, you know what I think? I think screw the system. And let's just take this another way. And I remember it was absolutely, for me, the beginning of burning the rule book. Because I was told there is no cure, there's no solution, he's always going to be sick, and oops, and good luck type thing. And I was like, yeah, no, we're not doing that to my baby. We're just absolutely never bloody doing that to my child. And then began a journey of pretty much, I've done it my whole life, I'm just slightly politer about it now, of going, no, I'm not doing it that way. I'm going to do it this way instead.
Right. Well, it's so interesting because, talk about giving your power away, and people look at the medical profession as the end all be all, and whatever they say goes, right? But when we see, certain things that, don't add up, right? And people get more sick, right? And it's not to say all doctors, because we've talked about this. There's some amazing physicians out there, really, really great. But, there are also ones that look outside the box. They look at what's working and move in a direction. And then when things aren't working, you adjust and do things. But when people are just blanketly told, do this because that's just what everyone's going to do, when you know that something's not working, particularly for your child. I mean, talk about unleashing the mama bear,
exactly.
To be able to, to protect your child. Right. So, that again can be something that can be, unfamiliar or scary for people, because we're told to trust the authorities, do whatever they say. And, part of really looking at what your freedom is freedom is choice, right? And be able to have the choice to be able to look at, do your own research, yes. Right? To look and see what is available and not just take whatever is spoon fed to you. So what were some of those early times for you? Because especially when everyone around you is telling you, oh, just do it, and how is it that you kind of got past that getting the research for yourself and deciding to do something
well,
different?
some of it I was very lucky because I was clearly told that we don't have solutions. So that was phenomenally helpful for me because I wasn't fighting every step of the way. I was only fighting some of the steps of the way. And the other thing that I thought, I was looking at this and I was like, look, I honestly think that if I've made my child stronger, then he has a better opportunity at fighting what his body is trying to fight through. So I'm a lawyer. And so the only single thing my law degree gave me was the ability to read immense amounts of really turgid, boring information and pull out what I needed from it. And that's pretty much what I did. I would go to bed every day with a thick book and wake up reading a thick book thinking, what's next? And I broke it down and I was like, okay, his body has an issue. He's having an immune response. How do I work on his immune system? And so I started with food and fruit and vegetables. I changed his diet, and that's what I first started with. And then when I finished working on his diet, then I started working on his emotions and mental state. And then I went from there to, and so I did it very, very slowly and carefully, step by step. That was kind of what I did. So every time, and the beautiful thing about children is that when you work on children, it immediately works so they throw up on you. It's very effective. So I was like, oh, well, that's not working. Next.
The body is amazing.
Yes, so that was immensely effective because I was kind of like, okay, no, I'm not going to do that one. We'll do another one. And it was things like understanding digestive enzymes were really good for his stomach. And I needed his stomach to be very strong because it was the brain of the body. And so I was like, okay, I need to get digestive enzymes. Where do I get them from? And then I read papaya had enzymes. So my poor child ate papaya every day for he can't touch it now. He hates it so much. But I think for like 2 years, I gave him papaya daily. It healed his stomach, but he's never touching a papaya again. So that was, I think what I did, the core answer to your question is that I trusted my instincts. And I was like, what is it that I think will work for my child? I didn't say no to any medicine, really, that like he was asthmatic. So they gave me asthma medicine and I used it when I felt like he really needed it. But until that point, I didn't. I just made him as strong as I possibly could. And then after that, I saw what it was that I needed to do.
Right. Well, one of the things that we're noticing also in the world here is that, people who, particularly in the people who have like small businesses, things, that the economy has shifted. Yes. There's things that have happened in the world where they've, quote, lost it all. And, I don't want to give the people here an impression that you are this privileged princess that has nothing that has ever touched your life. I'd love for you to share that you have literally lost it all, yes. From going to extreme wealth to poverty. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that journey with your children of literally not even knowing where you're going to live. And I think that there are a lot of people, whether they are actually there or they have the fear of that because there's been so much loss of how to head it, straight up and deal with it from that place. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that journey because some people don't when they fall that far, you find out who your friends are, you find out, what's true for you in life, and you really start looking at things through different eyes.
Oh, it's very true. It's absolutely life-changing. So my husband and I built up a very big company. We were very successful financially, but it was a very bad marriage. And as an Indian woman, my family was very happy for me to stay in the marriage. And as me, I thought this really sucks and I don't want to be here. None of you have to stay with him. Why am I here? And I had 3 kids under the age of 7. So I had a 3-year-old, a 2.5-year-old, and a 1-year-old. And I was like, and it was a violent marriage. And it was, there was he was an alcoholic. It was just awful. So I was like, okay. And I got up and I walked out one day and I was, there was just one terrible thing too many. And I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. And I picked up and I walked out with my children. And I remember a bag of nappies in one hand and the baby, the 1-year-old, the 2.5-year-old just had chicken pox. So I was literally waiting for the chicken pox to stop being contagious so we could go because, mothers. And this sick child with asthma and his medicine. And that's kind of what I had in 2 hands. And I was like, that's it, I'm leaving. And I was like, I'll go sit in a hotel. I had £200. And I was like, I'll just send me my money type thing. Because we built this business together. I was like, he'll just send me. I mean, well, naivety, thy name is, well, me. And of course he did none of the above. His goal, he wanted me to come back. So he emptied all our bank accounts and said, well, if you can't live, you have to come back. And I'm just really too bloody minded. And I think the combination of how I grew up plus having to fight for my son, I was like, we're never going back. We're just never going back. But it meant that we actually, I don't know how to tell you this. I don't know if anyone listening can understand. But if you do understand, you have my utmost sympathy. But that sense of being on the street, holding 2 bags with 3 small children and holding everyone's hand, and the kids are kind of like, where are we going? And I had no idea. I did not know. I didn't have enough money for a hotel room and food. I didn't know where we were going to sleep. My mother was furious because she said you should never have left. So she turned off her phone and said, I'm going to give orders that you can't get into the house. So because it was a gateway. And I rang up a friend and he said, oh, no, I'm so sorry. I can't help. And what happened was that my opposite neighbors, and we lived in this fancy neighborhood, was just driving in. And I remember saying, and they owned one of the Formula One. It was that kind of neighborhood. They owned one of the Formula One kind of cars. And I said, could we just have the afternoon? I just need to, because I'm having a problem. Just put the kids somewhere so they can have a nap. And then I was running around trying to find somewhere to sleep. And remember sitting on the pavement in tears because I couldn't find anywhere to go that night. And he had just cleaned everything up. All my credit cards had been canceled. So she let us stay there for the night. And then I finally got through to a girlfriend who was like, look, I have 1 room, but you're very welcome, obviously. And it was a tiny room with a bed, a double bed. And then on the side of it, I put sofa cushions on the floor. So the 2 children went, the 7-year-old and the 2.5-year-old slept on the bed. The baby slept on the floor because she was a year old. And I slept on the sofa cushions next to her. And we stayed there for 6 months because I didn't, because he bankrupted me. And so I didn't have any credit rating. I didn't have anything. I had 2 pairs of shoes, four outfits. And the kids, he gave us the kids' school uniforms and that was it. And so it took 6 months to move into a place of my own. And then I had to rebuild it all. It was brutal.
Well, and I'd love for you to talk about, and I love that you take it down to that granular of like when, unexpected things happen and you literally have been cut off from all the avenues that and the people who you think are going to support you. And when it's really faced in front of you of, if it happens to anybody, where would you go? Like if you literally had in like hours to decide where to go, and it's not just yourself. Now you've got 3 children that you're taking along with you, right? That's a big responsibility, not only for yourself, but whoever, takes that in, God bless that.
Oh my
friend.
God, let me tell you, this poor woman, I was like, we'll be here a week and then we'll find somewhere. I mean, we were there for 6 months and she had to fight her husband because he just wanted us out. He was like, why are you in my house? Sure. I mean, I don't blame the man at all. But we were very lucky. It had an outside door to that room. So it was kind of, but it was just, I gave her shares in my business later as a thank you, but it was fair. Great. She was honestly beyond the pay. That's literally angelic, isn't it?
Right. Well, yeah, that's what we know, that there's angels in the world that show up, that provision, right? When you need it being provided for and being supported is just so great. And so I'd love for you, because I'm sure people are thinking like, well, how did she go from there? Like what happened? I mean, from teaching what you were doing, like 18 yoga classes a day, and you were just building as the foundation. So talk a little bit about how you started doing that to build into Nosh Detox.
So the thing was that my goal was to not take my children out of their school. So that was my goal. And it was funny to have one starting point. Well, I had 2 starting points. My one goal was that I was going to pay these exorbitant school fees, and they were really outrageous. And I was like, I've changed everything about their lives. I'm not going to change the place where their friends are, who they know. They have to have one point of safety. So somewhere in my brain that just made sense. And honestly, now I look at it and I'm like, I would have bought property empires by now if I hadn't paid. But anyway, there we are. And the second thing was, I'm not getting married again. because that was the next easy option. Because we don't talk about this as much, but honestly, that was an option. I could have found somebody who would have looked after us and paid the bills. And I consciously was like, I am not making that available as an option to me. And I always say I'm very lucky that people don't always know what they will and won't do for money. And I know very clearly to the nth degree what I will and I won't do. So I thought,
yes.
So what I did was two things. One was that I couldn't work as a lawyer because I'd been bankrupted. So I knew that I was very good at fixing problems. So I literally went around and found people that had problems. And I was like, can I help with that? Can I fix this? Can I do? And there was the dry cleaners around the corner. They were trying to get a license and they couldn't do it because they'd been trying for a year and a half to get this dry cleaning license. I got that in a week. And then the guy gave me he paid me for that thing that he did. Somebody else wanted something done. I paid that. I had done some TV work. And so I was ringing up, some of the places I'd worked at and said, do you have anything that I can do? Anything that, they'd be like, can you do this? And I'd be like, how much? I never asked what they wanted me to do. I just literally said, how much? And then I would do the job. And they're like, do you want to know more? I'm like, just tell me how much money you're going to give me. I'll do it. So I did, the only thing I didn't do was cleaning. Actually, it was because I hated to clean. I don't even like to clean my own house. And I was like, I'm never doing that. Anything else, I invented yoga classes that you taught kids, because then I could do the hours of the children. So I started to teach yoga classes, and then I did 1 a week, then I did 5 a week, then I was doing like 10 a day, and then I just did hours and hours and hours of it. And then I don't know what to tell you. I just did a bit, and then I did a bit more, and then I did a bit more, and then I did a bit more, and I couldn't sleep at night. So I would put the children to sleep, and I would go for a walk for an hour and a half, and come home and then sleep, because my brain couldn't stop. It just was appalling. It was it's so terrifying to be that alone and to not have any idea. And I even at least had a roof over my head, even if it was a very unstable, frightening place to be. And so then I had a friend who came to me and he said, there's this guy, he's trying to get a business set up and he needs to get a license from, I can't remember where it was, Dubai or Saudi Arabia. And I was like, oh God, really? Why? They hate women. Why am I doing this? Which is obviously not true. It was just a perception. And they were like, well, can you fly to Saudi Arabia and do this? And I was like, oh yeah, I had no idea what I was doing at all. So I left the kids. I got somebody in to look after the kids for 3 days, and I flew, and I was like, okay, I've got 3 days to do this in order to make this money. And so of course I did it because I had no other choice. And then I'm in my 4 outfits and my 2 pairs of shoes still. And then I came back, and then somebody said, can you go do this? And the asks got bigger and bigger and bigger, and they were more and more money. Do you remember The Pursuit of Happiness, where the guy used to go
Yes.
That's what I did. I did everything in a short period of time, ramped it out, got paid for it, came back out. And the thing that I know that I don't think that I'm anything special necessarily. What it is that any woman in my position would do her best for the kids. I was just very bloody minded about what I expected that best to be. And I think there was a lot of hatred about how my ex, who kept turning up with his Rolex watches and his very expensive Ferrari, saying, you don't have to work this hard. You could just come back to me and it would all be fine, while giving us not 1 penny. And I thought, you know what? I think you should just go die. I honestly do. And so unfortunately, I'm not allowed to do that, but I'm just, success is the best revenge. And it just drove me for the next decade. It sometimes it still drives me today.
Well, it's like when you have like perspective, right? And to be able to see like what that journey is and what we're willing to do. And I think what's really important, especially for our listeners to think about, is when you think like you are at death's door, if you will, right? If you think that like you have no idea where you're going to go and what you're going to do, that there's always an option, right?
Yes.
You can always turn the page. There's always choice. This is when we're talking about, creating freedom in our life, right? That it's what we decide. And when you decide, hey, enough is enough, or this is what my boundaries are, this is what I want out of life, this is what I want for my children, when you get really clear on what those kind of things are, then that's the fuel, right? That's the fuel that you need to be able to do the bigger things that you're doing in life and to have that. And so I think this is such an important message for people to be able to hear. And, one of the things I love to ask, and especially since you've had such a range of places that you've lived, I think that the environment that we create and the environment that we live in really affects our day to day. So, we live differently in our bedroom versus our kitchen or our office. So what is your favorite room in your home now, and why?
It was absolutely nearly a decade before I could have a bath on my own, or even just a bath, because there was no space, and I mean, I wasn't going to go to my friend who gave me her house. Can I use a bath? It was just the weirdest thing. It's always the stupid little things that make a difference. But my ensuite bathroom must be my favorite place in the whole bloody world, honestly, because it's mine. It's just mine. I don't have to share it with 20 people, and I don't have to do, and I can be in it and that ability to have constant hot water. I think it's so hard. People will always look at people like me and think, yeah, but you've never really had a problem. And I will never forget the thing with poverty is it's eroding. It erodes your soul. It erodes your joy. It erodes your happiness. It's really hard to stay upbeat. And so it was having hot water. It was having my own bathroom. It was having a clean house. It was having more than one chair to sit in. It was being able to buy clothes. My kids to this day will still say, you don't buy anything for yourself. And I'm like, oh yeah, I got out of the habit of it because we didn't have the money for it. It's like when I buy food, I buy too much food because I can now afford that food. You never ever forget that. And it's a walking gratitude on a daily basis of having enough. Yes, I made it, but I'll never stop being grateful for it.
Yes. Well, and that's the distinction, there's Ogmundito's book around, how to live like your best life. And one of the first rules of it is to count your blessings, and nothing like having, life give you a curveball to really appreciate the simplicity of things, right? What those things kind of look like. And I remember when I was going through my divorce and I was working overtime as a police officer, and it was like everything went into my house. And it was like, I remember thinking, thank God I could go to my mother's to have my girls eat dinner, right? And it's just like these things that we take for granted that, show up for us. And again, coming back to that provision is such a huge thing. And I know we're kind of running out of time here, and I know that people are going to want to stay in contact with you. And I also want you to talk about, you have this, just powerful podcast, Activate Yourself. And I'd love for you to share a little bit about what that means for you, and what do you hope for people to gain in plugging into that?
Thank you. One of the things is that what I've learned is that when something terrible happens to you, you've got to work out whether you're going to see it ultimately as something that is a blessing or something that is going to destroy you forever. And once you've made that choice, that defines literally the rest of your life. So that's what I wanted. On the radio show, which Activate Yourself, what we do is I speak to people all the time, people like you, who are going through life thinking, here's what my life's going to be. I've kind of got my 2.5 kids. I've got this, I've got that. And then life comes and whack, and it just hits you. And then you suddenly are forced to turn left. But that left turn is actually a form of activation. It brings out the bits of you that otherwise you would never have to use, see, be. And the strength and power that I hold within myself now is a completely different space than I would ever have had if that had not happened to me. So I do regularly bless those circumstances, because I would never have found out these things about myself. I sometimes wish it had been a bit easier, of course, because I'm human, but we are where we are. And so on the radio show, I try and inspire people with more and more stories like that, of people that have had insane things happen to them that you think would finish any normal person. Not only did it not finish them, but it made them into this amazing person that you are inspired by. And so everything that I do, including with my company, Nosh Detox, we do that as well. We try and find ways to make you feel stronger, more powerful, more inspired. So when you feel like shit and the world's just coming to get you, you can turn your energy around.
Absolutely. And we'll have all of your links in the show as well for people to connect with you. And just one final thing here, as you know, our theme this year is people who are being fighters of freedom, like, creating freedom in your life. So how are you doing that in the world today?
Oh, I wake up every day and my goal is to make women feel strong and love how powerful that they are. And I think the stronger, the more confident, the more powerful you feel, you just bring such a sense of freedom to your life, because it isn't about you doing what someone tells you to do. It's about you doing what makes you feel good and you chose to do. Freedom is choice.
Absolutely. I agree. Well, thank you so much for your wisdom and sharing your journey and all the wonderful things that you're bringing here to our listeners. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again to everyone who came here with us. And until we connect again, live your spa life. Bye for now.